cars are one of the biggest ways to screw up your budget, to screw up your path to financial freedom, and to screw up wasting money on things that for many people are just, unfortunately, a necessary evil. Most of the country, most places where people live, you've got to have a vehicle in order to get where you want to go, because either there's a lack of public transportation or, whatever the case may be. It's one of those things you have to have. And cars have gotten crazy ass expensive. I don't know what it is. I mean, you guys know I'm a real estate agent and people talk about the cost of housing, but I'm telling you what, the cost of vehicles to maintain them, the payments, the interest rates, just tires, everything on a car has gotten so crazy expensive. I mean, I just bought tires recently. It was like $1,500 for 4 tires, and I didn't even buy the top of the line tires. I bought good tires, but man, it is crazy how you can spend $500, $600, $800 on a tire, even more, depending on what you're looking for. So let me give you a couple of recent conversations I had with people so that if you're someone who either is in a bad car situation currently or is thinking about, I got to do something to either get a new car, upgrade my car, I got an old car, whatever the situation is might be. Here's 2 different stories that I got recently, again, from 2 24-year-old people. One leased and one purchased. So let's talk about the person who purchased first. She was able to put $25,000 on a car. To be honest with you, she had said it was part of a college graduation gift. When she graduated college, her parents said they'd buy her a car, but they only said they would spend $25,000. So great. They gave her the $25,000. She bought a Mazda, nice car, and it cost just about $36,000. And so had a 3-year loan, had a car payment of $395, and had a car that the plan was to be able to keep for at least 10 years. Insurance was less than $100 a month. So far, there's been very little maintenance other than an oil change or two, because you've been driving around for a couple of years now. You're starting to pile up the miles on that thing. But the plan always was to keep it for the long haul. So really, she probably could have bought that car for more like $33,000, $32,000, but decided to put a couple of upgrades in it, knowing the plan was to keep it for the long haul. And then 3-year car loan. So at the end of those 3 years, she'd have a vehicle that she would own. Yes, it's not worth the $35,000, $36,000 she paid for it, but let's say you're somewhere in that $20,000, $25,000 range that you could sell it for, and you have no more debt on that car and a pretty small insurance payment every month. So pretty good deal, pretty good situation, especially if it ends up being a long-term reliable car that is end up kept for 10, 12, 14 years, whatever the case may be. Now, another story I have this week was somebody I know that leased a vehicle. Now, I'm not going to say what the vehicle actually is, but it's an electric vehicle. And to buy one of these electric vehicles new would be $85,000. Now, these 2 people, both similar age, both honestly similar careers, both making similar money. So to buy one of these vehicles was $85,000. So this person decided to lease this vehicle. Now, to lease this vehicle, it cost $20,000 up front, and then they had a payment of $650 a month for the next 3 years. So if you take $650 a month for 3 years and that initial $20,000, it is $43,200, I think, off the top of my head. It was close. It was between $43,000 and $44,000. Or the other person owns a vehicle and she spent about $36,000. If you add a little interest in there, maybe a little bit higher, but she still paid less for a car she owns versus this car that was leased. And so we were having a conversation about this. Now, not only that, the insurance on the purchase car was under $100. The insurance on this lease car was somewhere in the neighborhood of $275 a month. So they were spending roughly $175 to $200 a month more on insurance, but because it was an electric vehicle, they were spending less money on gas. But of course, some of that got chewed up in the fact they were spending more money on their electricity bill. So, some of that washes a little bit, but just strictly thinking about the car payment, the lease person, we figured out between the $20,000 down and the $650 a month, if you add it over those 3 years, was spending $1,205 a month for 3 years for a car that at the end of 3 years, they have to give back and now go find something else to drive. So I'm looking at these 2 scenarios thinking, oh my God, now you can see how people and vehicles can really screw up their budget. So I'm not saying you should not lease. I'm not saying you should buy. And I'm sure as hell not saying you should buy new versus used and all those things. There's pros and cons to all of these situations depending on what you're trying to do. But there's a lot more to vehicles than just thinking about what is my monthly payment going to be, and whether that monthly payment is for purchase or for lease. There's so many other things involved depending on what the maintenance costs are expected to be, and we can research those things, what the insurance costs are expected to be, and we can research those things, whether it's how much gas mileage, how much gas you think you're going to go through, whether it's a gas car or a diesel. Like, for example, the car I'm sitting in my car is actually a diesel car. So then I have other things like DEF fluids that I have to put in my car as well. What are the maintenance, if the regular maintenance schedule, how expensive those things are. And so there's just a lot of dynamics that people aren't thinking about besides just what is my monthly expense as far as a payment goes. And so for me, I am not a car guy. I don't need fancy cars. I'm not into fancy cars. I'm not a car collector. So for me, the car is more of a business expense to get me where I need to go. And it is more of a necessary evil that I have to have. Where in the real estate business, you kind of have to have a halfway decent car, especially back in the old days when, most of your clients got in your car with you. A lot of times now clients are not in my car. They're following me to other places. But, again, you can't drive around in a pile of junk. And especially if you've got kids, you want something that is safe and reliable and all those kind of things. So there's this fine line between spending too much and not spending enough. And I just want you to be thinking about all these things because I'm looking at those two scenarios, and the one who purchased because she's saving probably $500, $600, $700 a month versus the person who is buying can literally fund her Roth IRA for the next 3 years and have a car at the end of the game, where the person who leased is just going to give the lease back and have to start from scratch. So strictly thinking on a financial, just numbers on a paper, this situation, the lease is way freaking worse than the person who purchased. Now, until we extrapolate this out for the next 10 years for those two people, we won't really know the financial damage the lease person did versus the one who bought a car. But I can promise you this, the one who bought a car has got a much better chance of actually getting ahead financially and getting that freedom number, because if your payment is $395 a month versus $1,205 a month, it's a huge, huge difference as far as that stuff goes. So anyway, now, another story. There are other things, especially if you guys are entrepreneurs or business owners, that you need to know about regarding cars. So the 6,000 pound rule. If you don't know what the 6,000 pound rule is, for someone like myself, if I buy a car that's over 6,000 pounds in the name of my business, I can write that car off in the whole first year. So when you're playing this car game, like for me, because I don't care about cars, I bought this Mercedes 9-10 years ago, and people thought, oh my God, look at Mr. Fancy Pants with his Mercedes. But I buy used cars. So my favorite kind of car is what I call a little old lady car. It's somebody where, you have a married couple, maybe live in a country club. The husband maybe drives a lot more than the wife does, so her car doesn't get driven a whole lot. And then I can buy her used car, 3, 4, 5 years old. I've done it 3 times now. That maybe, and again, I don't know for sure it came from a little old lady. I just use that as my reference term. But those cars have always had less than 20,000 miles. They were always anywhere from 3 to 7 years old. And I was able to get them on a steep discount. I probably paid half of what those cars would have been brand new. The one that was 7 years old was less than half. But this car that I'm sitting in at the time, brand new ones were probably $75,000 to $80,000. And I was able to buy this car for $40,000. And not only that, I was able to use it as a business expense to write against my company. So the whole $40,000 became against my income that year. And again, I still had to spend the money, but it basically made it almost a 40% discount. So I always think of this car costing me $25,000. Now, the one thing about this car is it is more expensive to replace the tires. It is more expensive to do the regular custom maintenance and all those things on there. And when I first bought it, my kids were still middle school and high school age. And they're big people. So I wanted to be able to make sure I had a car big enough to put my family in, to put my clients in, to get around and do all those things. And so it was a move for me where I probably spent more than I normally wanted to. And really, it was more the maintenance for the long term. But I haven't had a car payment in probably 20 years now, because I've done this multiple times where if I can't write a check for the car, then that car is too expensive for me. And it's not something that I want to purchase. So cars, you got to really pay attention to cars. Cars will crush your budget. Cars will crush your finances, and there's nothing worse than you have a car that has continual problems, continual maintenance, continually out of service, and now you're having to either Uber or rent a car to get where you got to go. So I realize, you can't go so cheap on a car that it's not going to get you where you need to go, but there are very, very, very many cars like Toyotas that are very reliable, that are inexpensive, that will get you from A to B. especially if you're someone who's in mass amounts of debt that is trying to get their budget and finances back in order, because if you don't, then you're just going to keep this snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. So I wanted to come to you today from my car because we're talking about cars. Had a couple crazy conversations again with young people about cars. And again, we'll go in much more in depth. And if you have questions, by all means, reach out to me about the pros and cons of lease versus buy, new versus used, and then gas versus electric versus diesel. That's your kind of first conversation as while you're thinking about price, age, size, trucks, vans. I mean, there's just so many dynamics with cars. They just have to keep that conversation going. So anyway, with all that being said, hopefully this gets you thinking a little bit about how cars, which most of us have to have, will either really help you in your path towards long-term financial freedom or can really kick you in the ass and send you into a tailspin of just financial problems left and right. Because every time you think you're getting ahead, then something with the stupid car happens again, and I've screwed yourself over. So anyway, if you have questions, DM me. Hopefully that gets you kind of a starting path to helping on thinking about cars, because it is one of the biggest things in your financial budget that will screw you up.